Welcome to Daily Persuasion. I am Joshua Lisec. I am the New York Times bestselling author and co-author, a ghostwriter of 97 nonfiction books, and a certified hypnotist. It's through my unique experiences I curate current events and teach you how to influence the VIPs of your life and career. Now, someone replying to my recent video called How to Change a Liberal's Mind, featuring a recent and viral post. I believe it almost got 30 million views from Scott Adams on X, formerly the Twitter platform, talking about how difficult it is to deal with people who have terminal TDS, aka Trump Derangement Syndrome, which I am observing is a real problem. A real problem. Now, as I mentioned, there was a comment on that particular video that caught my eye, and I wanted to share it with you because this is worth its own video. So it's content about content about content. Ultimately, everything on social media is recursive, so why would this show be any different? This character is called @ColusFallon6470. Okay, this person has to say, you don't always have to convince someone of something by reasoning with them. You only have to help them become a more emotionally robust individual, and their brain will allow them to hold less idealistic viewpoints, as well as greater uncertainty. Let's pause there. Does that check out? It's not about reasoning with someone, it's about helping someone become more emotionally robust, or perhaps resilient. And they can then go from idealism to reality. Is this observable? Yes, it is. Through parenthood. When someone becomes a parent, they go from, generally speaking, about 80-85% of the time, they go from being maybe a little bit more liberal to conservative. They go from libertarian to a bit more, let's say, far right. They go from being already conservative to being a nationalist. Okay, that's how it goes. And I believe it is because of the reality of parenting, the reality of nurturing and caregiving and protecting and providing for, ultimately to ensure the survival of this helpless, beautiful soul called your child. Everything that you believe that is not based in reality, that ultimately prevents you from taking care of this child, has got to go. It's got to go. And you find yourself capable of doing things that you never thought capable of before. In terms of putting up with lots of loud and uncomfortable noises for an extended period of time, getting less sleep than you ever have, things that you perhaps thought you never would be capable of, you find yourself being capable of them. You become a more emotionally robust individual. Now, parents, particularly mothers I have found who live a life of luxury already prior to the children and then during the children, and will often have like in-home caregivers and house cleaners, they are still able to hold luxury beliefs. They're insulated from the downside of luxury beliefs. Luxury beliefs are those things that you are in a class, in terms of the class system, maybe as upper middle class, let's say, or an aristocratic family, elite, the managerial class, being a theater kid, let's say, and in your reality, you are insulated from the consequences, the negative consequences of your belief. They cost you nothing. You can virtue signal your beliefs, and the poor, the vulnerable, the downtrodden suffer the consequences. So think about all the people in 2020 who protested police brutality. Many of these people were the affluent female liberal class, or the children of, maybe they were college students and they're going to an elite university paid for by a rich dad. And the consequences of those luxury beliefs and looking how wonderful I am talking about, oh, we need to end police brutality, and look at me signaling my virtue and my morality and protesting, holding a sign. The consequences of that resulted in police forces being understaffed and underfunded, which resulted in crime increasing, particularly violent crime, that affected Black people the most. Congratulations, affluent white female liberals, you done it again. Those are people who are insulated from the reality, and that probably needs to be addressed. Wouldn't you agree? The way to address that is going to make them very uncomfortable, but that's for another video. This might not be on point enough to be appropriate here, but it is worth considering that humans don't actually come to conclusions, specifically conclusions about values and should or ought claims, purely based on their conscious reasoning. Yeah, that makes sense. People don't think, oh, I should do this because of conscious reasoning, or I value this and I consciously and intentionally reason myself into that. People who value public safety, they value zero tolerance for criminal behavior, were themselves the victims of a violent crime at some point. People who value the Second Amendment, they had their purse stolen, for example. Did they consciously reason themselves into that value? Absolutely not. It was forced upon them, that value. That's as non-conscious, non-intentional, and accidental as I think you could possibly get. So I think we can agree with this character. Let's continue. Now, admittedly, this hypothesis is just that, a hypothesis, but it is a model of human thinking that still has very decent predictive and explanatory power. And put simply, it goes something like this. Already, I think we can agree with him, with it being predictive and explanatory. Not in every case, particularly with the affluent white female liberals, the awfuls that we'd like to call them, who have in-home caregivers and they have house cleaners and they can kind of sit back and sit pretty and let working class women who have to take care of their own children, by the way, and clean their own home, by the way, they get paid a little bit to come in and take care of their children and their house for them. Things that perhaps they ought to be doing, it prevents them from being emotionally robust. It keeps them fragile and non-resilient. Let's come back to this. So this is this person's hypothesis, model of human thinking. The emotional and psychological robustness of an individual will have a larger impact on conclusion drawing than will the general intelligence. The brain will run its own algorithm and make determinations about what beliefs will be best for the internal and external well-being and homeostasis. The metric can be broadly thought of as the cross point of psychological robustness versus fragility and informational constraints and pressures. I think about this. Yes, I do not believe that intelligence is directly correlated to wisdom in adopting new belief because, as liberals like to point out, they are overrepresented in college graduates. But they have the Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan Kenobi problem. Remember when Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Chancellor Palpatine are all captured by General Grievous at the beginning of the movie? Obi-Wan turns in disbelief and he says, wait, how could this happen? We're smarter than this. That is the liberal viewpoint if it was self-aware. It's because they believe they're informed. It's because they believe that they're too smart to fall for propaganda, that their shield comes down, their defenses come down, because I'm not the type of person who would fall for propaganda. And now my defenses drop. And I believe whatever NPR tells me. So is the way of NPR Americans. Okay, coming back to this, it's not about intelligence. Yes, that's right. I believe it's about exposure to reality and exposure to the consequences of a fragile viewpoint. You will find PhDs talk about how important it is to replace police with, let's say, counselors. And they'll say things like, well, police officers, can't you just shoot him in the leg? This is what someone says who has never, ever held a gun in their hands. So they're giving what they believe is enlightened wisdom, but there's no experience. Someone with an IQ of 90, if they have an IQ of 125, let's say, this person's saying this, the person with the IQ of 90 who's actually held a firearm, maybe works in a police force, will know that that is batshit crazy. Just shoot him in the leg. These people who are instigating a, let's say, attack on police that results in them feeling they must fire in self-defense or in the defense of others, putting down the perp. they are going to be aware that it's much more difficult to hit, let's say, the knees or the legs of someone rather than the torso or chest. And the number of rounds it takes to stop the lethal threat versus, oh, can't you just use rubber bullets? Can't you just use a taser? It's almost as if these people who say this, regardless of their PhD, it's as if they have never seen dash cam footage or body cam footage from a police officer during one of these, let's say, violent events where there's violence from police or to police or both. Of course, we may have seen videos of a perp with a knife charging a police officer. And there's one a number of years ago that I happened to witness in which the police officer literally unloaded every single bullet in their magazine into the chest of the perp. But the perp got them, the police officer. They reached them, attacked them, and began attempting to stab the police officer after the police officer shot every single bullet that they had. I expect that upon witnessing that, the PhD, affluent, white, liberal individual watching this might have a negative hallucination. That's where, instead of hallucinating something that's there, you hallucinate it away, and it's as if you hadn't seen that. So if you then go and ask the person afterwards about policy around lethal force from police officers, they will respond, I believe, my hypothesis is as if they hadn't actually watched that video, and they would almost have no memory of what they just witnessed. It would be that would be the case. I hypothesize, to use that word. I believe this. It's not until they actually experience the reality, and they have to become a more emotionally robust individual. How do you get stronger? You lift weights. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? So they have to do some emotional weightlifting to become emotionally robust and adopt new beliefs. And this works with men. Low testosterone is associated with liberalism in men. And as a man begins to lift weights and eat bioavailable protein, what happens? He becomes conservative across the studies. And this has been for more than 10 years that we have known this. So this checks out. Side note, Stockholm Syndrome, while not well documented in literature, is an instance in which the captured individual makes viewpoint shifts that better align them with the current environment. Well, that's interesting. It makes them safe. Makes them safe when they're in danger. Interesting. So in essence, the conclusions people come to are often predetermined by subconscious processes that assess what is not optimal to believe, in part based on the environment, like social groups, family, friends, job status, city, location, relationship needs, etc., and the degree to which the individual is emotionally robust enough to psychologically handle said conclusions. This also explains not just what conclusions people come to, but also people's high degrees and instances of perceived certainty. Psychologically robust individuals can better hold both uncertainty and conflicting information on a subject without needing to artificially direct things toward definitive conclusions. So, psychologically robust individuals can handle uncertainty and conflicting information. So a non-psychologically robust individual, they will say things like, pit bulls? Their eyebrows and their eyes will jump up. Pit bulls? There's no such thing as a bad dog. It's a bad owner. No dog is naturally violent. All dogs are good dogs. That's not a psychologically robust individual. And you know why. As an extension of this, psychologically robust individuals have an easier time contending with their environment, being further away from an ideal. Right, that is correct. They can understand that in reality, there are people who commit crimes and want to commit crimes, and there will always be unless we stop them or we prevent them, or we make the consequences of that so painful that they'll think twice because they don't want bad things to happen to them. But those who are further removed from a non-ideal situation, meaning they live in effectively an ideal world, will think, well, I've never witnessed a violent crime. I've never been a victim of violent crime. So therefore, my experience, and they'll do this little, they do this little. So my experience would be that it's safe. And we should just be nice to each other. And everyone's basically a good person, which is what they think until their home gets broken into. Let's see. They can accept how things naturally are. This is the psychologically robust individual. They can accept things naturally as they are, even if that means difficulty and suffering for them. As psychological fragility increases, individuals tend to have greater concern for how things ought or should be, and to such an extent that it becomes essential for the environment to be altered if their current level of robustness, as opposed to the individual developing the robustness to suit the environment. That's good. That's good. Let's see an example of this. Well, people should just not steal. Well, people should just not get addicted to drugs. Well, we should just not have homelessness. Well, we should just not let Putin invade Ukraine. Well, we should just not let, well, there should just not be, well, there should. They're shitting all over everything. What we ought to do is followed by a completely impractical suggestion. The least robust individuals, this hypothesis goes, are going to be saying things like that. I think that's correct. This is good. This is good. Thank you very much. At Colas Fallon 6470. You done it again for the very first time.